Hello, I'm Kevin Gletz. I'm a program facilitator with the Regina District Industry Education Council. I'm the program facilitator in the Sun West area. And I'm here today with Corina Fritz of Rosetown. And she's going to tell us a little bit about her post-secondary experience. And we might as well start off the bat with Corina just welcoming you, first of all. And if you can tell the students what program you're in and where it's located and the year of program and things like that.
Yeah, you bet. So I am currently in radiation therapy. It's in Toronto, is where I'm going to school. It's kind of a joint program with the University of Toronto and the Michener Institute. So we get the small class sizes, but we also have the ability to use the University of Toronto's campus and all of their resources that they have available. I'm currently in my second year of radiation therapy and my third year of post-secondary schooling in general. I did my first year at the University of Saskatchewan and then moved to Toronto to do radiation therapy.
Okay, can you that getting into that there? So the year at U of S was that what was that? Was that a general arts and science or what kind of program was that?
Yeah, so I just took a year of generalized arts and science. I ended up needing prerequisites as you do need. There's like, I think six prerequisites that you need in order to apply into radiation therapy. So I'd kind of taken those prerequisites and it was just a whole bunch of different courses to kind of get the feel for what university was like and all the different courses and kind of what interest me as
Okay, so
well.
this program that you're in now, there was no option to go directly out of high school. You had to have some university training.
Yes.
Okay, good. So can you recall any were there any factors well in high school? Like, well, I guess what I'm getting at is some high school students as they're doing their career decision making, deciding where they want to start in their post-secondary studies and training. Were there any factors that you were considering in high school that kind of led you this direction, or was this something that came up, as you went into university?
So in high school, I knew that I wanted to go into healthcare. I knew nursing was not for me, but I had no idea what I wanted to do in healthcare. And coming out of high school, I had no idea that this is where I was gonna end up, especially not in Toronto. Um, yeah, like I said, knew I wanted to be in healthcare, knew nursing was not for me, which is what led me to arts and science because I could take a bunch of different courses and see kind of what interests me. And then I actually ended up in my first year of university, I was using the universities, they have like a career page. And so I was going through that to look for kind of what jobs were in need at the time. And I came across the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency. And so I kind of started looking into radiation therapy and radiation therapists and everything like that. I had reached out to the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency to kind of see if I could talk to somebody, if someone would be available to answer some questions and just gain kind of an insight into the program because there isn't honestly a lot out there about radiation therapy. It's kind of a hidden, unknown career, unfortunately. So I reached out to them and was able to get in touch with a couple therapists. And so I was able to go meet with them, ask them a few questions, kind of get to see what their experiences were like. And then it actually turns out that there is a partnership as well, which is how I found out about the University of Toronto. Um, they can, yeah, you can send it's a whole process you go through the admissions process at the U of T. You send in kind of a resume and everything to the SAS Cancer Agency, and they're able to sponsor you.
Kind of what I take away from what you've said a bit is that you did some digging, and that for students to kind of, if you want to kind of go off the traditional beaten path, and I'm not saying a radiation therapist is a non-traditional, but again, you said there's not much out there on it, kind of thing. You got to go looking for it. And would you recommend the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency as a place to kind of go looking for any of these related jobs?
Oh, absolutely. There's the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency isn't just radiation therapists. There's radiation therapists, there's nurses, there's a whole
Yeah,
there's a whole area. It's not just
just
the
one job.
cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the website would be if they just went to the Saskatchewan Cancer Society website, there would probably there's a part on careers or something there.
Yep, if you just look up the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency, there's a whole page and there's a whole section as well on like radiation therapy and their partnership with the University of Toronto. And they have an email there. They are so good. If you reach out, they'll help you out in any way that they can.
Okay, good. So that's a good points for some students that might be interested in this session and what you're doing to look further into it. So big question, and one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you is that you came from a rural high school, small town Saskatchewan, went to a relatively, small city for your first year, but you're now in Toronto, and that's a long ways from home. So a long ways from Saskatoon, even where you went for your first year. So what's it like to transition to a big city, Toronto, from a rural setting? What are some things you experienced there?
Not gonna lie, it was very difficult. I'm very much a homebody. I love being at home with my family. So it was a really tough decision to actually decide that I was going to pursue this and I was going to move to Ontario. FaceTime became my best friend. It still is. I FaceTime home all of the time, at least. Usually I FaceTime my mom every other day. I'm FaceTiming my grandparents every week. Like I'm FaceTiming basically as much as I can because that's how I feel connected to home. And that's kind of how it helps ground me. Um, yeah, it was not easy. It still isn't. There's still hard days, but I find that like knowing when I'm gonna go home and having that set helps because I know like, okay, it's only this much longer. It's only a month and a half. It's only 2 months. I'm not wondering when am I getting to go home? So
Yeah, so kind of like what I hear you saying a little bit there is like you're breaking into chunks of time that are manageable. Like you're not looking at this. So again, I never. How many years is this? You were there for how many?
it's 2 years in Toronto
Okay,
and then a year of clinical, which with my partnership, I get to be back in Saskatchewan for.
okay, so 2 years in Toronto though. So if you look at 2 years as a chunk of time, that's a long period of time, and you probably break it down to. You just told me right before we got recording here that you're home for almost a month here at Christmas time. So if you kind of go, I can get from September to Christmas. That's it, that you can break it in. Were you home before that or between that anywhere?
Yes, I was home at Thanksgiving as well.
Yeah, so you kind of break it into those. I'm going to get back home. I'm going to get back home, and like you said,
Yeah.
FaceTime. Beautiful to have that technology that we have today. It wasn't possible back in my day for sure.
Yeah, no, it definitely makes it easier for sure.
Yeah. So anything was there anything you could do to prepare for this big transition or not? You got to immerse yourself in it.
Pretty much like I like to think that I prepared myself, but I really didn't because for me in this situation, there was nothing that I really could do to prepare myself aside from mentally, I guess I could say.
Yeah.
I was very brutally honest with myself, and I had that conversation with my parents before I left. Like, I knew it was going to be hard being away from home, but just like constantly reminding myself that it's not permanent, it's short term, it's only 2 years. Like, if I need to come home, I have that option to come home. It's not like I am forced to stay out there. If I need a break and I need to come home, I can book a flight and I
Yeah.
can come home and see my family. Like,
Yeah.
so that was definitely a big thing. My parents also did help me move out when I first went, and they had spent a week with me, which kind of helped ease the transition a bit. I wasn't kind of jumping in blind to a big city. I had them with me to see where everything was and not having a vehicle as well. So figuring out the streetcars and the subway and everything like that, it definitely helped to have them there with me.
Yeah, those are big changes from rural life to big city. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Some of those transportation things, even things we don't even think about. I never even thought of that. Yeah, you got to get around.
Yeah.
Um, so what were you best prepared for? Anything that were you?
Honestly, the only thing I can say that I was prepared for was living on my own, which helped that I had that first year at the U of S where I was only an hour away from home, but still lived by myself. So I knew how to cook for myself. I knew how to do everything like that.
Yeah,
But honestly, that's about all I was prepared for.
jumping right from high school to Toronto would have been maybe a lot bigger
Yeah.
stretch. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can imagine. Yeah. Um, is there anything you weren't prepared for? Like I'm talking about Toronto, like not so much Saskatoon, but Toronto.
Yeah, I definitely was not prepared for the heavy workflow of the workload of how intense my program is and how mentally exhausting it was going to be. Because even compared to my first year at the U of S, like it's a whole different program. It's a very intense program. Like you get a full bachelor degree at the end of it. So it's technically your 4 years
Okay,
that's
yeah.
condensed
Yeah.
into 3 years. So it's very heavy, it's very intense. So that was definitely, and I don't think honestly anything could have prepared me for that. Um,
It just hits you.
yeah, pretty much.
Here's the work.
Yeah.
Any coping mechanisms, anything you recommend for people to kind of to get through that push of that heavy workload?
I think it kind of depends on who you are. But for me, I found that learning to prioritize my classes and what I needed to work on was what kind of helped ground me the most, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
So like going through and kind of like making a list of absolutely everything that I needed to get done and figuring out like, okay, this is everything I need to do, and then breaking it down to what do I need to do right now.
Mhm.
Uh, I found that definitely helps with the mentally exhausting part of it, as well as making sure to take breaks for yourself. And like if I start to get too overwhelmed, I'll go for a walk and go get coffee, or I'll just go talk to friends for a little bit. And a big thing is I found studying with friends because the program is a lot and everybody is going through the same thing, especially being away from home. Like a lot of people in my program are also away from home. So kind of finding people that you know are going through the exact same thing you are, everyone's in the same situation, and being able to, as bad as being able to be exhausted all together and help each other get through that and study together and tackle everything together really
Makes sense.
helps.
You're not in it alone then. You've got some
Yeah.
comrades that you're there with, yeah, colleagues too. So sounds like time management. Maybe really like it's those are time management skills you've kind of said like prioritizing and writing things down. Here's what I got to get do now, and here's what I have to get maybe done by the end of the week. Those kinds of things. Yeah. So that's good. And I guess too a little bit of a little what I heard you say too is a little bit of life work balance. I mean, you know, you need to kind of pull away sometimes and yeah, take give your mind a break.
Yes.
That's good. Well, I think you already answered the next one. What do you do if you feel when you're overwhelmed or out of sorts? Like you mentioned, taking walks or go for coffee or whatever. And do you take any events in the big city, or is that just kind of something that's we always hear about that all the options you have in those big cities, or is that something that's kind of bypasses you?
No, there actually is. My school is also really good for that. They have a bunch of basically like discounted things that you can do. So like there was a boat cruise at the beginning of the year, so like doing little stuff like that. So I went on a yacht
Oh, cool.
and we just kind of did a little cruise around the lakes, and they have like discounted Blue Jays tickets and like all little stuff like that that definitely helps to kind of make sure you are taking those breaks and getting out and not just focusing on school.
Yeah, yeah. While you're there, you might as well.
Exactly.
You're not going to make too many yacht rides back in rural Saskatchewan, anyways.
No, don't think so.
That's good. So you kind of mentioned this already, but how often do you come home roughly? Like,
It's like kind of once in the middle semester. So like Thanksgiving, I came home, and then Christmas, Feb break, end of semester. So
yeah, yeah, you're home 3 or 4 times through the year.
yeah,
Yeah.
any
Okay, good.
break, any long break that I basically have, I kind
Yeah.
of make sure to come home.
Now you mentioned friends or classmates and stuff like that. Meeting new people, new friends, was that easy, hard, or how important do you think that is?
Especially being away from home, it is very important. You need to develop a strong support system there, as well as like having a strong support system at home helps. But having a good support system being away from home is a big thing I've found. Um, I found that my program is a lot smaller than most university classes, which definitely helps because everyone's in the same boat. Everyone's trying to meet friends. Like, I know pretty well everyone in my program because there's only 40 of us.
Okay.
Like, that's all there is. And then all of our labs are even smaller. So there's only 8 people per lab group.
Yeah.
So it's that definitely helps. My program had an orientation where where I met most of my current friends. And during that first week, honestly, as hard as it is, just talking to as many people as you can because everyone's in the same boat. Like everyone's in new territory, everyone's just trying to meet people. We're all in the same situation, all starting a new program that we've heard very intense things about. And
So did you just kind of, how did you, what's that first step like to meet somebody new? That you just walk up to them, hi, I'm, introduce
pretty
yourself.
much, yeah. Like
Oh,
right at orientation, you kind of just have to walk up to somebody that's. I went up to somebody who's just standing. I kind of chose people who were standing alone and kind of went up to them. It seems a little less intimidating than walking up to a group of people. So I would kind of just walk up to them and
yeah.
get their name, where they're from, seeing if they're away from home too, or if they're from Ontario.
And that's such a different thing for, again, rural Saskatchewan high school student. You did have a year of university experience before you went, but I mean, you've known some of the same people for all of your life, and meeting new people is not something you've had to necessarily do a bunch of.
Yeah.
So it's a different experience, I'm sure. So, and different from
Yeah.
first year arts and science, though, where you would have had classrooms of probably some classes of hundreds of students. Pretty
Mm.
hard to kind of, it's not, and then you go to another class and there's different people again. So this
Yes,
the cohort of 40 is probably a nice thing to get to know people.
it is. It really helps.
That's good. Um, what about living arrangements? Like, where, like, are you in a dorm or are you live in an apartment, or what's the situation?
I'm living in residence right on the Michigan campus. So it works out that we have our own room and our own bathroom, and then shared kitchen and laundry with our floor. And there's only, I think, like 11 people per floor. Kind of depends on the floor, but generally 11. And it's kind of nice because they prioritize how far away you are from home. So I got kind of a higher advantage, which is nice because rent in Toronto is crazy, that's for sure.
Yeah, I can't imagine. Yeah, well, that's a good
Mhm.
thing to have residence then. Yeah, that's for sure.
Yes.
So it's a dorm, you have your own room, but a kind of a shared, you said kitchen and common space kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So, and you're liking that? That's okay. It works out fine.
Yes, it works out really good. And then it on kind of the top floor, they have like a lounge area. So there's a couple couches, some TVs that you can go upstairs and watch. There's a pool table.
Mm.
So
Yeah, nice little place to get away.
yeah,
How far is the U of T part of your training? Is it from the campus, Michigan campus?
it's only a 10-minute walk. So it's
Oh,
not
so it's
bad
close
at
by.
all.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's not bad. Yeah. So imagine, hey, so the financial aspect, like how do you, looking after your own finances, where do you, where have you been able to draw financial aid from and that kind of thing? I think sometimes students and even parents want to know, how does this work financially? So can you explain that a bit?
Yeah, for sure. So like I'd kind of mentioned earlier, I'm fortunate enough to have a sponsorship with the Saskatchewan Cancer Agency, so that helps me out a lot. And then I also have a student loan to help cover the rest of all of my expenses, like my living, groceries, food, everything like that, because Toronto is quite crazy expensive. And then I've also had summer jobs kind of in between all of my university. And then I've also been applying for kind of as many grants as I can. That's a big thing. Like you can get quite a bit of money from different grants if you take the money or if you take the time to fill out the forms. And some
Mhm.
of them require essays, some of them are just your financial like status, and some of them are quite easy. So it's just taking the time to look for those grants that are available and filling out the information.
So the sponsorship was the Saskatchewan Cancer Association. So can you explain that further? Like what you mentioned before, you come home in the summer. Is that do you have a placement there then and back in Saskatchewan?
Yeah, so they kind of have it throughout. So after my first year, I came home and did 2 months of clinical. And so there's, yeah, that clinical placement. There's two cancer agencies or two locations of the cancer agency. There's one in Saskatoon and one in Regina. And how it works out is that all of my clinical placement is split up between the two of them. So I was in Regina for the first 2 months that I was home this last summer. And then I'm there until I have a spring semester there as well this year. So I'll be there until the end of July. And then I'll come home and I'll do 4 months of clinical in Saskatoon and then 4 months of clinical in Regina instead of having to do my clinical in Ontario.
Well, that's nice. And are those paid clinicals? Is there some salary, or that's just part? It's a training thing,
Yeah.
and that's part of the tuition that they cover is that training. So they give you placement, but they're so that's a nice program, and I think that's important for people to realize that. And then what's the payback though? I think you mentioned that. What do you have to give back to them?
Yeah, so I have to work once I'm done all of my school, I just have a contract that I have to work for them for 3 years in exchange for them covering me for 3 years of school.
And do you have a guaranteed job right right from graduation?
Yes.
So that's the really important thing to note too, is that you're graduating with your degree, and for 3 years you are for sure employed by them, and I don't imagine there's going to be troubles being employed after that either.
No, there is a very big demand for radiation therapists right now. So,
Not many school programs have that built right in. I mean, maybe there's getting to be more of that, but not every school program has it, so that you come back, and you probably don't mind coming back to Saskatchewan anyways, so by the sounds of it, because you like being close to home. So that's probably a no-brainer for you to say, yeah, I'll you've got a job lined up before you even start. You just got to get through it.
yeah,
Yeah,
that was definitely one of the biggest things when I was looking at it too, was I knew I wanted to end up back in Saskatchewan anyway. So
and
having this opportunity really
yeah,
helped.
and we want you.
Yes,
And many,
exactly.
many others to
Yeah.
come back and work here. That's right, especially in healthcare. It's a big deal. Um, I think sometimes people get that thing, well, she's gone off to Ontario to train, we'll never see her again. But I mean, like that sometimes there's a bit of a myth around that sometimes when people leave to go take their training. But I mean, this one's kind of got a, kind of a built-in drawback for you. That's good.
Yeah.
Um, is there one or two things that you've experienced, even with Saskatoon or Toronto, going away from home into post-secondary, that you wish you would have known before you left?
The biggest thing I wish I would have understood was that it's okay to not know what you're doing right out of high school. I felt like when I was leaving high school, everyone around me knew what they wanted to do, where they wanted to go, like what they were doing with their lives, and I had no idea. And I felt like, in a way, I felt kind of behind for that. Like, I felt like I should know what I was doing and where I was going to go, but I had no idea. Um, and honest, like I wish I would have known that that's okay. Like it's okay to take time. You haven't experienced half of life. Like
That's right.
it's
You're pretty young.
yes, it's a big expectation to be able to try and figure out what you want to do for the rest of your life at the age of 17, 18. Like,
Do you feel there's pressure to have
yes.
that knowledge? You feel there's okay, good, and I think that's important for teachers to know, schools to know. It's important for parents to know, and for like the students themselves. Like you don't have to have it figured out. And I know as a career counselor for many years, I mean I really try to emphasize that with students. You don't. It's the same thing you're saying. You're only 17, 18. Life should not be mapped out for you completely. I mean, you might want to add, where am I starting? You may be looking towards that, but and
Yeah.
the stats show more and more people all the time are changing on the fly. They
Mhm.
maybe went into one thing in post secondary, but that's not where they stayed. And
Yeah.
it's interesting. So I'm glad you said that. Anything else? Any other things you wish you'd known?
I think that was the biggest thing.
Okay, good.
Like,
So any other tips or comments for high school students before we end this today?
I guess the one thing tying back into my whole experience that I would say is don't let the distance or somebody else's opinion stop you from trying something or going somewhere else. Now is the time in your life that you can up and move. Like nothing is holding you home. Everything is still going to be here when you get back. Now is the time to go and experience life away from home and
Wherever it
yeah,
takes you,
just
it takes you. Yeah, good.
exactly. And just because you move away from home doesn't mean that it's forever and that you are stuck there. Because that's how I thought at the beginning when I was thinking about leaving was, well, if I go and I end up hating it, like I have to tough it out because I made the decision to go to Toronto. But that's not true. Like if you move away from home and you're only there for a month and decide that you hate it, or same with your program, if you decide that you absolutely hate your program, there's no shame in changing your path or coming home and taking time to figure out what you actually want to do and where you want to go. Like I said earlier, like you haven't experienced anything yet. Like
Well,
it takes a lot of time and
that's great advice. I am glad you said that because it's so important to let people know that it's okay to change your mind and
mhm,
something else. Yeah.
okay to
Well,
be lost.
Corinna, that's awesome. Thank you very much. I think this is going to be a pretty popular session. So good luck in the rest of your year and have a Merry Christmas. And we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, thank you. You too.